though, I don't know if you have a hard time throwing away old Christmas cards, but I often do. In fact, I've got a nice little basket of them. And I discovered that my parents had saved Christmas cards for many years as well. And Dad says they never look back at them. And so he was like, take them, let's clear the clutter. So I threw those in my stash. And even though it is just a couple days before the Christmas holiday, for me, it's a whole season, and I actually start my season, except for what I have to do for retail purposes, I start my season a little later than most people do. By the time I go to buy a Christmas tree, the Christmas tree lots are sold out, so luckily I have a dealer. I know where to get a natural tree later in the season. But, you know, the stores are already clearancing things, and I walked into a store today that already has its spring garden stuff up. So, me personally, I'm still celebrating, and I think this is a fun project if you don't want to save your cards from this year for a whole year and do it next year, which, by the way, this could be the heads up. If you don't want to do it this year, here's an idea for next year, save your cards. But if you want projects to do yourself, possibly with children, because even young children can do this, the grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, something to do in the lull between the Christmas holiday and New Year's, or even the going back to school time, make a bunch of these. You can still enjoy them this year hanging up, or you can stash them and have them for next year. But they're a fun little project, easy to do. These are the 3 that are on the video. There are some more here that I've made previously. Don't ask how many times I've filmed this video. We're just not going to talk about that. I will back this out a bit. So, yeah, every time I say that, I go in instead of out. I'm a little directionally confused. So here are some other versions that I made, and even a tree topper, a hole in the bottom, and I'll talk about this at the very end of the video, but it's basically made using the same tools and techniques. So lots of different options. Let me give you a rundown on the tools and materials. I'm going to see if I can set this up. So this is over here, and I'll kind of lay things out here. I may go out of order, but you can screenshot at any time so that you have this for later. Oops, there was one more that didn't get in the mix. Okay, so bare basics. You're going to need some greeting cards, and in most cases you'll need 2. And I like to try to find some that are kind of a similar style and subject matter, similar colors, so that they look good front to back, like here where I did the chickadees, and there's the birch trees and deer on the back. There's kind of some turquoise. On this side it's very grayed down, but kind of the same colors, same kind of theme, very naturey. So there's that. In some cases, like on this one, I used 1 card and cut 2 images off of it. And so these 2 cards, you could do 1 and 1, front, back, and get 2 ornaments. Or you could use, you know, front, back. And in this case, they might not be quite big enough. I'll use, this is kind of a good viewfinder, an old tape roll. Like in this case, if you did the circle that size, well, it's nice, except you've got an elk rump over on that side, which isn't quite as lovely. If you tried to do both birds, you'd end up having to get some of that border in there to get it the size of the spools that we're using, and I'll get to that in a moment. So there is a slight chance, if you're going to want to do something like this, you may want a circle template, or to keep it simpler, smaller jar lids, anything like that. You can use a compass. I find that the pencil of the compass, much like pencil that could be used at other stages in this, but I don't. On shiny greeting card stock, pencil just doesn't show up very well. So that's largely why I didn't use my compass when I did this. I just drew around something. So at the very least, you need some greeting cards. You probably will want, or you could want some gift wrap scraps, and we'll talk about what else you could use instead of that. But, boy, don't stack them up. That'll make it easier. In this case, this ornament, the sides are covered in leftover gift wrap. So you may want gift wrap scraps. You're going to need some tacky glue at the very least. You will need some. And you are quite likely, at the very least, going to need some nice string. Like in this case, I have some crochet cotton here. Now, you don't absolutely have to have it, but if you're looking for the absolute minimum of supplies that you need, you'll need something. Choose a nice Christmassy color or white, or if you're into the twine look, twine would work for what you're going to do as long as it's thin twine. So there's that. I should have put a basket on the floor so I could just drop things. I think I'll just drop things anyway. So there's that. Now, bases. You need something to put between your cards. And what I've used for all of these, pull out 3 of them, even though that's not the one here. We'll use the one from today, although it's the same kind of thing. What I have used are ribbon spools. That's what the round ones are, so empty ribbon spools. And depending on the brand, the depth inside is quite different. Cheapy ribbon from dollar stores and end cap racks at the craft store typically has the cardboard much closer to the edge. And for what we're doing, you may prefer that, but I never throw any ribbon spools away. If things come in multiples, it's like, oh, there could be a craft project there, and I will hang on to them. And I've used ribbon spools for lots of different craft projects over the years. We'll probably film some others. So ribbon spools work great for round ornaments. In this case, both of these were canning jar lids, regular mouth, wide mouth. And pectin boxes can work as well. I don't have any right here. I gave away the one I did on a pectin box. They're more rectangular, so you're kind of stuck with a definitely upright. With the square boxes, you have the option of going on point if your greeting cards will fit or fit well enough. So there's that. So you'll need something like that. And if you haven't anything like this, easy solution. Cardboard. You can cut shapes out of cardboard. Now you can do circles and squares, which are the easiest thing because you can easily cut them with scissors. But in this case, this Christmas tree shape was cut out of cardboard. For that, you may want cookie cutters, and you can of course make your own patterns, like a Christmas tree, fold some paper in half, cut it out, draw around it. Okay, but if you're doing more intricate shapes, you'll probably want an X-Acto knife. So just to be aware, X-Acto knife and a cutting mat. It's pretty hard to cut more intricate shapes just with scissors out of cardboard. Not impossible. But there's that. So we've got that. Now you're going to need some edging stuff. You can use the ribbon that came on the spools, and originally that is what I had around this, and then I decided to fluff it up. But you can simply wrap the ribbon around the spool and glue it on, and that's going to finish your edge. I don't show that in this video, so I'm showing you right now. You can just glue that much on and you are covered and done. You may want some tissue paper if you like this fluffy look. You may want some sheet music. That's what I've used here. And sheet music is pretty easy to find at any thrift store. Let's see, I'm down to just scraps. I've used the rest of the sheet. Didn't get more out. But anyway, you know, comes in books. You easily found it at thrift stores. I haven't yet been in a thrift store that didn't have it over in the book section. So there's that. What else is on here? Scissors, pen or pencil. I touched on it briefly with the talking about using a compass for circles. I personally use ink pen. I think it shows up better. You can use colored pencil. It also is hard to get it to write on glossy cardstock. So I use a variety of colored pens. Markers will work, but water-based markers might smear, and they typically have a fatter point to them. But on one like this, I would probably choose the teal to draw around, and then that way when I cut out, if a little bit of it shows, it doesn't matter. Or in the case of the square ones, when I'm doing the square ones, the line is drawn right here where it folds. It doesn't really show up, but if you're worried about it, use a pen in a color that coordinates or matches with your card. So there's that. Let me get the back out of the way a little bit. So I'm pulling back in here momentarily, I'm sure, for some other demo purpose. I did say scissors. I didn't mention I use paper scissors and junk scissors. Junk scissors are for cutting anything like pipe cleaners and things like that, so that I'm not mucking up my paper blades. Not super necessary if you just do random crafts. You get scissor replacements fairly inexpensively. Not a big deal. The ever popular finger wiping rag, terry cloth rag, slightly damp on a plate so that you can hopefully keep it from getting against your papers, especially like your tissue paper, because it'll make it soggy fast. But this comes in so handy. It's my best tip. Keep a finger towel nearby. You'll want an awl or a pokey tool. Most of the ornaments, I didn't much use it today, but most of the ornaments that I've done previously, at some point I needed to poke a hole, either through here in order to be able to thread through for a thread hanger, or like here, poking down into the top to insert the hanging loop. So you'll probably want one of these. Can be found at dollar stores. That's where this came from. It's not very good quality, but it does well enough. Can also be found in the paper arts section of most craft stores. You can probably get by without it, but you're likely going to want it. Tapestry needle for stringing thread, and this is like in the bare basics, you'll want one. You'll probably want it for one or two of the things that we do all the way through this. So a tapestry needle. You can sometimes poke the hole you need with the tapestry needle. Cardboard can be a little tough, a little hard to poke it through. So if you don't have a pokey tool and you do have a heavy duty needle, it may do the job well enough for you. You gotta have strong fingers. Okay, so down into the extras, I mentioned sheet music, scrapbook paper. In the instance that you want to cut images out of your card that are smaller than your background, you may want some scrapbook paper, or that's where your extra gift wrap, leftover gift wrap scraps come in. Tissue paper, if you want to do the fluffy edges, you're going to want some tissue paper. Hot glue is optional, but if you do want to use it, you'll want a hot glue gun. I used it today simply because it's quicker for certain things. Tacky glue will work for everything, and you will need tacky glue regardless, so hot glue is an extra. Tinsel stems. Those are these, look like pipe cleaners, except they're glittery. It's a great way to get some sparkle without having loose glitter. They do shed a little bit, but not badly. Unlike the glitter that I've got on one of those ornaments that keeps coming off. These you almost certainly will want, but you can get by without them. You may want glitter. If you're glitter phobic, just ignore that. We're not going to do glitter today, but I will show you later in the video just one example of where I did use it. Jingle bells. You don't absolutely have to have them, but many of the ornaments that I've made, I did put a jingle bell on the bottom. You could also use large beads, like a big red bead that looks like a cranberry, a pom-pom, a tassel, just something to kind of hang below that gives it a little bit more dimension outside of its basic boxy shape. Thought those were nice. Hot glue gun, we talked about. Knitting needle. Now, I don't knit, but next time you're in a thrift store, if you're interested in doing a variety of crafts, they're handy to have on hand. They work great as sculpting tools and various things. We use it in today's project for creating tissue paper ruffles. So you'll want a knitting needle. If you don't have one, if you have metal shish kebab skewers in the kitchen, you know, hiding in the back of one of those drawers for use next summer because you haven't used it the last 4 summers, but you might one day make shish kebabs again. A shish kebab skewer will work. Bamboo skewers sometimes work okay, but the slickness of the metal does make a difference. So there's that. You can also, for this, use like a paintbrush that has a pretty thin end to the handle. You really only need about 3 inches of it. You need something back here to hold on to, so like a little nail or something won't work. But you'll see when I get to the tissue paper ruffling what that's for. A ruler and bone folder. This is for making it easier to fold your stiff greeting card that's trimmed off just like an extra 1/4 of an inch beyond the edge of the box. You'll want to be able to fold it, and it's going to be a lot easier if you have a ruler and a bone folder so that you can press along it. Now, if you don't have a bone folder, you can use, one thing that I've used in the past is take the lid off your ink pen and use that bit. That will work just fine as a bone folder. It's not absolutely ideal, it's a little flexible, but it'll work. So that'll get you through that. If you decided to do fancier shapes than squares or circles, you may want cookie cutters to draw around if you're not wanting to make your own patterns. So I think that covers all of the tools and materials. Let's get on to the making. So to get making on this, I've chosen which cards I want on which shapes, and for the cardboard version, Christmas tree shape, and I've drawn around that. Now I'm not going to cut every single thing out on camera because, you know, cutting is cutting. You can do that without me showing you how. I will show you how I have chosen where to draw around. On this one, I have the advantage of happening to have an old tape roll, and that made it extra easy. It's the same size, very close to the same size as my spool I'm going to use, and so that made it really easy to use it as a viewfinder. So that's how I figured out, you know, where I want to place it. I'm not going to draw around this because I want it to be really exactly the size of this. So that's how I chose that. And I am going to draw around it in ink pen, but something matching just in case I don't get it all trimmed off, although in this case I will because I'll trim inside the edge. So when you draw, you end up a tiny bit outside of course. And so then when you cut just inside that line that you drew, and it'll be the same size, which you probably knew. But everybody starts somewhere, and so maybe you didn't. And then the same on this. And what I did on this, as far as choosing, you know, something was going to get cut off. And it felt like having the bird in the foreground be complete and having the other one coming into the scene worked well. And then I didn't want this one's face too close to the edge, and then that way I also capture some of the berries. So that's where I'm going to position this one. So I'll do that off camera. This one is a little bit different on these. And first of all, I'm gonna real quick take my hot glue. And again, you can do this with all the way through. You can do this whole project with tacky glue. Hot glue is just quicker. So, you know, some things I enjoy going nice and slow on crafts. Other things, sitting there holding it for the glue when I don't have to, yeah, I could skip that part. So for this bit, I'm going to use hot glue. There are other things that I will definitely use my paper glue, but where hot glue is appropriate, I'm using it. If you don't want to use it, you don't have to. As I've mentioned multiple times, ad nauseum. So on these, I want some excess to wrap around. I'm going to come over the edges. And so I've got that there. I'm going to want it out. And if you, of course my box is not going to be perfectly straight, so I want to cut out in that area. Probably didn't really need to mark that so much as I need to mark where it's coming around. And because this scene has so much black in it, I am going to use my black pen. I know, it'll show a little bit. Straighten that up a hair. I can live with it. Just make sure it's a nice clean line. I don't have an awful lot to fold around on this one. This box is just a hair wonky. So I've got two things. I've got my, where I'm going to cut the card out, and on the snowman, that'll be even wider. And then I've got my lines where I need to fold it. And that's where bone folder and ruler come in, because I want to make it easy to do a crisp fold. Do that. Okay, that'll make it fold easy. And then I'm going to clip right across that corner, coming right to the edge. Right to that point. And then, without too much trouble, it will fold, even though it's creased for folding best the other direction. It'll fold this way just fine. So there's that. And that is going to fit just perfectly right there. Just a nice little bit of overhang. And that will get covered up with what I use to trim the sides, but that way there isn't any gap there. and you absolutely will not notice whatever of the pen marks are there. They're going to blend in with what else is going on. It's pretty hard to see them as it is. So there's that. I'm going to do that bit off camera and get everything ready to glue in place, and then I'll be back with you. Okay, I've got this one more to cut, and I did want to mention that here where I've used the cookie cutter as the pattern for my cardboard pieces, and for the cardboard piece I drew to the inside, but then when I used it to, just like I did the tape roll for the round one, I used this to figure out where I wanted to cut the pieces out of the card, like being strategic about the birds on this one. Then when I went to mark it, I had done it to the inside for the cardboard. I'm doing it to the outside for the card, and that will just ensure some overlap. The other thing, because it might not be perfectly symmetrical, I traced one with the cookie cutter right side up, and then I flipped it over, and yes, that does make a slightly larger outline on the other side because you have that lip. I'm fine with that. The important thing was being sure that it was going to match on here, and being as I'm tracing the outside, it leaves a tiny bit of available stuff to trim. So I'll get this cut out, and then we'll get things glued down. And I'm just cutting just inside that line, cutting that off. That'll leave it plenty big enough to just overhang the edges. All right. And then I don't throw the leftover bits away. I should, I know, like I don't have enough scraps, but there's an awful lot of nice stuff here that can be used for smaller projects. The sentiments may be useful for another thing. This particular card, the back was as beautiful as the front. A lot of the cards that I've used previously, not so much this one, but a lot of them have the same image on as the front in a little tiny emblem on the back. And I thought those would make great charms, either journal charms or with some resin, possibly wearable charms. I haven't tried that yet, but it's on the list. So I've saved those because of course I did. So we're going to do some gluing. Now I am going to glue my 2 layers of cardboard together, and I'm going to make sure I have them lined up around the edges, because if I reverse it, sure enough, that cookie cutter is not perfectly symmetrical. And I want them to act as one piece. So for that, I'm going to do hot glue. Although cardboard, really, if you want it to stick together for years, using white glue or wood glue is great, because the fibers in cardboard love to get raised up and locked together, which is how wood glue and paper glue work when they're working at their best. And cardboard has nice big fibers that love to be raised. Okay, so I'll set that, I don't have to set it aside, it's pretty well cooled. And then we'll get on to the tacky glue. Did I just pull that off with my teeth? I did. When you take classes from me in person, everybody gets their own brand new little glue bottle, so nobody has to have the glue bottle that I've been using my teeth on. I don't know. I think evolution should have given us 3 hands. And so you'll see, I'm just using my finger to spread this out on slightly dimensional surfaces, even though it's flat. I just don't find that it's real handy to try to use a gift card glue spreader. Did I check beforehand to see which one? I think this one is the same as this. No, I did not check beforehand, but yay. That was a stroke of luck because I didn't check to see which way I had forward. Luckily, my rather skimpy memory served me well there. Now here, this is interesting. I've got a whole lot of card left over. So before I glue the other side on and make it hard to get to, I'm going to go ahead and trim. Apparently, when I cut out, I cut quite a lot smaller. I did. Don't know why I did that. That's all right. My hope was to have the card come out a bit bigger. I didn't realize it was going to come out quite so much bigger, but that's all right. We can deal with that because I did want the option to trim it in a bit rather than finding out it wasn't quite big enough to cover and then having to pull out the paint and match up the edges kind of thing. What I could do is pull out the X-Acto. There we go. And get quite a good trim on it that way. And if you don't have an X-Acto, no worries. It's going to take you a couple minutes longer to perfect that trim. And you can test it before you glue things down and trim it in advance. I do kind of like trimming after the fact. There's a little roughness in the cardboard there. I like trimming after the fact because I know that's exactly where it is going to be. If I trim it before I glue it down, chances are good that it's going to slide before I get to the other side. I'll be trimming over here, it'll slide around, I won't notice. I'll trim over here and then discover the whole point of cutting it bigger was wasted because I've trimmed things off I didn't mean to. Some people are a bit more aware of what they're doing when they're doing it, and they wouldn't have that problem. Yeah, don't want to trim it any closer. Except I want that little tiny point off of there. It's probably something that doesn't even show up on the camera, but it's bugging me. There. Okay. Now, for the other side, are we going to have a really huge surprise here? Slightly, but I think I'd rather just glue it down first and trim it after. And the other ones will go much quicker. So I've got a bit of trimming to do on that one as well, but it's got good overlap, which is all that mattered to me. So I'll do that off camera. You don't need to watch me trim again. You saw what I did. Quick demo on this, and then I'll finish these up off camera as well. I'm getting the glue all over, but then I'm also going to go and make sure that I have enough near the edge that I can spread it out to the edge because I want those edges glued down. Should be fine. Hopefully it won't decide to dribble all over. Leaving it on its side means it's always ready to go, but when it's a fairly new glue container, sometimes they sort of just keep pouring. Seems like that one's going to be okay. And because these are card, you don't have to worry about having a super smooth, even layer of glue. If you've got just thin paper weight, regular copy paper weight, then you want to be sure your glue is spread really even because it does actually make a difference. But when it's true cardstock, get the glue off. When it's true cardstock, that doesn't really matter. You don't see air bubbles and things. So I'm just going to take a moment to press those down well. These little thin cardboard boxes that I'm gluing onto are a bit flexible, and so you may need to hold things down for a moment longer than you would on some other surface because the box flexes and pops things back off. But once it's there, it's there. Okay, I'm going to finish that up off camera, and I'll be back ready to do the edges. Okay, I've got it most of the way glued up, and then I realized there's something I wanted to mention. See these marks? This is so that after you've glued down this side and you flip it over, you can be sure to get it right side up on the second side. With the boxes, it's not quite so difficult if you're going square because, of course, there's writing on the box and you can tell which side is right side up. So that was easy enough. Had I been doing it on point, like the way this one is done on point, again, I would have put an X on the top corner on both sides, just so that I didn't have the unhappy moment later of discovering I had one side upside down. So just something to keep in mind. And then on these, I did just put the glue right onto the base rather than the card. Just easier to hold on to. Smoosh the glue around. Sit about like, they do kind of sit cocked off a bit. Don't want them looking like they're standing on their tails. Okay. Just a little rub. And then on these, I did find that I needed to go around and just kind of pinch down that edge. I just gently rubbing it down didn't seem to quite seal it of any place that it wanted to pop off, especially if it was glossy card onto a glossy ribbon spool. It just needed a little extra encouragement around that edge. All right, so we're done there. This one's all trimmed, and we're ready to decorate the edges. Now, the easiest thing is to do something like a ribbon. In this case, I've got this velvet ribbon that's the right width for 2 thicknesses of cardboard. On this one, I could keep it simple and grab some ribbon off of a spool of the same size, and this is a little smaller than what was on this spool. I could very easily just wrap the ribbon around. I'm going to do a tissue paper ruffle for that one. But we'll start with the velvet ribbon. Ooh, I wonder if this scrap is the right size. If it's this and a bit bigger to cover, yeah. Okay, well, I will use that snippet then rather than cutting into more. If I was doing a thinner ribbon, like a satin ribbon, or this is even like just barely a fabric ribbon, it's more of a gift wrap ribbon than a sewing kind of ribbon. If I was doing those, I would pull out the Fabri-Tac glue. It's great for gluing fabric without soaking through. Because I have the thickness of the velvet there, the velvet nap, I'm going to go ahead and do this with hot glue. That's a little tricky, just because with the cardboard, there's plenty of places for the hot glue to fall into. And I'm not going to try to go too far with that. And of course, if you see me flipping around, if you've worked with hot glue, you know exactly what I'm doing. There's all those little spider web things. I'll leave a little extra on top I can trim off when I get back to this. I'm starting at the top. I don't know if I might regret that later. It might have been wise to start on the very bottom. I might have preferred that, but too late now. because it's a stickin'. I'm going to press it in, and I think I better make sure and check it from both sides to be sure it's covering the way I think it is. I think this is going to be pretty. Good old cardboard. Can't get any more basic than that. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and overlap. Just had to think about that for a moment to decide how I wanted it to look, if I just wanted to end it, butt it up together, or if I wanted an overlap. And I think the overlap will, although it shows more in a way, I think it'll look more finished. The only trick with this is it's going to be a little bit trickier to poke a bit of wire through to All right, I've got these ready to glue on. Now, in the past, I've done it always just with tacky glue. I'm tempted to try hot glue just to see. So bear with me. I may decide this was a dumb idea to use hot glue, but we'll stick a little bit on here and see what I think about this. One of the things is that working with tissue paper, you don't have much between your fingertips and the hot glue. And I'm just using, in this case, the paintbrush handle. And no, it cools so fast trying to put it on thin enough that it's not going to soak through the tissue paper and burn, and yeah. Okay, hot glue, not a great option for that part. Now we know. So I'm going to go ahead and put on a string of this. And I'm trying to keep that tissue paper nicely crinkled up. It's going to want to straighten as you're going around the curves. It's like, okay, and now we'll ease around the curve and spread back out. It's okay if it straightens out some. You don't want it to straighten out too much. And using that same knitting needle or the handle of the paintbrush. But yeah, with tacky glue, you have time to press it in, and you do have to sort of backtrack ever so often and just make sure things are still stuck down, because of course white glue likes to be held. It's needy. Just because it likes to be held. I don't suppose that really means it's needy. It just, you know, likes its needs to be met. I do ever so often glance up at the screen and make sure that I am actually on camera. If occasionally I'm off camera, sorry, I'm focused on what I'm doing, not on the fact that I'm filming. Cutting myself some slack on that. Yeah, it's just how my brain works. Okay. And I'm not sure. I think just 2 is actually going to be enough. I did 3 of them. And as far as how big around compared to the spool, let me grab a spool that's the same, that one's the same size. Okay, so I started out with paper that is one and a half headed on almost twice. Yeah, it would just almost wrap around twice. So just about double your length, give or take a bit. So that's about how long your flat paper is before you ruffle it up. Okay, and I'll do one more. Now this ruffle, it's not, I don't think, how traditional piñatas, I learned in elementary school how to make the piñata paper ruffles. It's a bit more involved, and making enough to cover a whole piñata took forever. This technique actually works really well for piñata covering. So if you have to make a piñata at some point in your life, remember this technique. If whatever ruffling method you are shown is tedious, or if you're just winging it, this will work. Other places I've used this technique, let me start back at the top. Other places I've used this technique is like cut out foam core or cardboard would be just fine. Letters or shapes for party decor. This makes a great way to get a fluffy dimensional covering using some relatively inexpensive materials, and you can make some very large decorations. I would do the ruffles, you know, much wider paper, like cut 2-inch wide paper to do that. But you can get lovely big dimensional stuff going on. I may decide I want that third ruffle in between. I'm seeing just enough cardboard in there. It's pressed in. Because I'm trying to make sure that my cardboard isn't showing here on this edge, and that is leaving a bit of a gap in the middle. I thought it might come together enough to not need that other piece. Okay, now that I've stuck that in the glue, do not stick it back on there. And go up to the end of the glue there. Stick. Yes, I know you have your needs. Stick in there. Okay. Turn that a little extra. Okay, now to decide. I think there's enough spots where it's going to show that I am going to go ahead and put one down the center, and I'm going to make sure that these edge ruffles are pushed out to the edge enough. On one of these, I had actually wrapped red ribbon around and then decided I wanted to do the ruffle edge because I wanted something that showed on the face. And so that did cover the cardboard. You could certainly wrap a strip of paper around the cardboard first. Make sure it's glued firmly so that when you're gluing this part down, it's not glued to something that's loose to begin with. That would be my only big recommendation on that. Okay. Right now I'm just kind of going back through and pushing them apart a little bit so that I can get the glue in between. Because, yeah, wet glue and tissue paper, that's a bit of a tricky combo. Had I known for sure I was doing 3, I would have made it a little easier on myself and done bottom, middle, top, rather than trying to put one down the center, but I just wasn't sure. Also, the other reel I used was just a tiny bit narrower and too covered sufficiently. Although again, I did have red colored ribbon down underneath it to begin with. I'm going to finesse just a little bit. I need a little dot of glue to finish my ends. That end down in between there. And there. In you go. And I've glued it to the knitting needle. Oh, there. Let that dry, it'll be fine. But yeah, that does not bode well for getting this other tissue paper piece in between. You know, I'm not feeling brave about putting that other piece in between. I think I'm going to end up sticking things. So, on this one, that's all I did, was 2 rows of Actually, this one just has one row of ruffle over the top of red ribbon. So that's an option. This one has 2 rows of ruffles. They're cut a little bit wider, so there's more fluff to them, so they don't show. I am going to do option 3 here. Now I could jump up and grab some red ribbon, but since we have the tinsel stems, and this has a bit of shiny silver to it, and this has snow glitter, I am going to, because this may give us one other thing too. Let's see, is that going to be, yep. This will also give us our hanging loop, which I think I'll put in at the beginning. I'm going to bend one end and make a little hanging loop. I may decide once I get around that that wasn't necessary, but I have gone off script. Look out. So I'm going to go in here, and when I marked that top, I did put a mark on the spool itself, which is going to be handy right now because we can see where that is. I am going to run this right through between. It's going to be a little tricky to work it in. This is going to fill in that spot, I believe. Let's see. Bend that upright right there. Try not to smoosh anything. I go off camera, sorry, I'm getting it right up to my nose. I think, give that a bit of a curve to begin with. There, then I'm not fighting it. Would this also have been better to have done to begin with? Yeah, probably. Okay. Off script, so much for making this video quicker. This is actually the second time I filmed it because the first one was so long and drawn out, the editing was going to be beyond my beginner level patience. To be honest, the sound of my own voice, listening to me say the same thing for too long, like on repeat, because you have to go back and forth and try to find just the spot to clip and all of that, it actually puts me to sleep. And I decided it would be faster to refilm than the time it takes me to fall asleep and wake up. And as my little dopamine hungry brain, it's like, no dopamine, no do-a-me. Okay. And then I'm going to twist. I might kind of smoosh my paper, but I can fluff it back up after the fact. So twist that wire until it's pulled up nice and snug. And then, okay, our little end piece is out. Okay, now take the knitting needle, go back through, fluff this. Well, I think that's perfect. It's colorful. The edge is covered. It's got that little bit of sparkle in there. I'm liking it. It's subtle, you don't see tons of it, you just catch a little glimpse of it. I think that did nice. Okay, so there's a thought, but you may want to put that in first before you're trying to glue in your ruffle. Learn from my experiments. Okay. So there's that. And you've got this little bit hanging out. And now you could have done this with ribbon and you could have left a loop that's long enough to just hang on its own. I do not love ribbon loops when it comes to hanging things on the tree. I like having a wire hanger because you can control the direction that the ornament hangs much easier. I think it cuts down on a lot of frustration. And they're easy enough to cut from just hardware store wire and bend them. So there's that one. And I don't think it needs anything else added. It's got a little sparkle to it. Is it catching the light? Yep, a little sparkle. Yay, I like that. Okay, who else is ready? Let's see. This one, we have to decide, does it need now, even though it's got sheet music, do I want to add ruffle around the center of that? I don't think so, and I think with it being out like this, it's so exposed. If you were to store them for a year in your box of Christmas ornaments, I think you'd end up with the whole thing mashed. On these, I have this idea, I don't know how true it is, but I have this idea that because the ruffle is glued down into a channel, it's somewhat protected. I don't know. My head just makes these things up. Do I want silver? Do I want gold? I'm not loving gold with that, and oh, surprisingly on this side I like it better than I thought I would. I guess because there's enough brown in the card. It kind of picks that up and works okay, but I'm not super excited about it. Am I excited about silver with it? Not bad. How do I feel on this side? Oh, better than the gold. Yeah, let's just go for that. Now this one, yeah, one isn't going to go around, so I'm going to need to hook two together. And because I know I'm going to want to hang, that's probably not the best way to do that. Try that again. Let's overlap them. I'm going to want to hang a bell off the bottom. Okay, I'm going to twist it together, but then I'm going to go out to the sides. Just to keep that flat-ish. Am I going to hang the bell from this? Am I going to put just one strand of this around? Or am I going to do two strands, one at each edge? I think on this I'll just do one around the center. I did that on this one, and I think that came out fine. I think I'll do that. And then I could have left a little loop sticking out for a bell if I had made that decision a moment ago, but I didn't, so oh well. To what appears to be the center. If in doubt and it bothers you, measure it. Okay. And in this case, I think what I'll do, because I have enough extra, I think I will loop these just a bit. Loop and twist. And loop and twist. Whoops, spread that apart. It wasn't twisted quite enough. Loop and twist enough that it holds its shape. Let's see if that makes kind of a little bow that's cute. Not sure I'm excited about that, but I have extra. Maybe it gets a little crown to it with one more loop. Okay, that's respectable. So I've kind of looped it into a little crown. There's a little bit extra here. I'll just wrap that around bottom and back through that center one, because that center one I'm going to hook the hanger onto, so we're going to want that to be secure. and press. This is basically pipe cleaners, so how perfect it's going to be, I couldn't say. Trying to get it to not look too messy. Something like that. Okay, and I'm not going to just leave that because it can slip around, and especially since we're going to hang from it. So I have done this with tacky glue on the other ornaments. Put the tacky glue on, you know, slip it aside, put tacky glue on, slip it back into place. And I only did it on corners, and it held just fine. But you do have to, once you glue it, set it aside and don't touch it. Don't try to hang it up from that until it's dried. In this case, I'm going to use hot glue because I have it. And I don't mind sticking my fingers into it. Do I love sticking my fingers into it? No, but I don't. You know, I have Teflon fingers. Okay. So I'll do just a bit. You don't have to glue the entire length of the thing. And again, you can do this with white glue. You do not have to risk sticking delicate fingertips into hot glue. The advantage to using white glue is you don't have to then go back later in good lighting and find all the spider webby threads to pull off. And then on the bottom, since I know I'm going to be sticking a bell in the center, I don't want to stick my glue dot right in the center. I'll stick one off to either side. That way I won't have any trouble wrapping the little thread for the bell. Yes, I glued my fingers to it. Okay. Oh, I'm liking that. I'm pleased. Nice. Okay. Of course, then the hanger can go on top, but I'm going to wait a moment. Put these aside, and let's do a jingle bell. Now, because I use silver tinsel, I probably want a silver bell. Oh, there's a bigger one. I kind of like to keep them in proportion. I have tinier ones, but that just doesn't seem to add much. That is kind of more of an embellishment. I like that with that. Now, before I put them away, what do I think on these others? Do I want a bell below this one? Not that. I've got silver in there, so I probably don't want gold, although it's actually kind of pretty. How's it look with the other side? Could do. I think I know the reason for me to do this is to show you the pokey the hole thing. So I might do that since we haven't had to poke in for ornament holders. I'm going to attach a bell down here, even though I have that channel stem I could hook to. I'll show you how to hook on by poking a hole in things. So I'll do it on there. Would I rather have a red bell? Would I rather have a few? Ooh. 2 or 3 with a little gold one. 2 or 3 with a little silver one, since I've got silver going on. Might do that. Okay. And does this one need a bell or anything to it? I don't think so. Because it's the Christmas tree shape, I don't think it needs something else hanging off the bottom. Again, if I embellished anything, I would add some dots of glue and put some glitter on there. So, set that aside. Put the extra bells out of the way. And yes, here in the studio, almost everything is in clear glass that can be. Just makes it so much easier to find what you want when you want it. So that aside, starting with this one. Okay, what did I decide? Gold or silver? Gold. I'm going to go silver. Get the hot glue bits off of me. Okay, for this, just need a little bit of that thread. And in this case, I think they both have a light blue. And given the selection that I have here, that's what I'm going to choose to use. Black thread actually could be just fine. There's black on both sides, but I don't have any handy. Dark green. Ooh, actually I like the look of the dark green better. Well, let's go with that. Even though that's not a real featured color. Blends nicely. Has that deeper tone. End of thread. There we go. Won't need an awful lot. I'm going to cut off more than I think I need though, just to make it easier to tie things. And then before I work with it, I'm going to pick the glue off my fingertips because I know when it comes to tying little tiny bows, my fingers are clumsy enough without an added layer between my nerve endings and what I'm trying to hold on to. So there we go. I am going to use the needle just to make it easier to get it behind the loop. And a moment ago, I saw that needle sitting right out here. There it is. Do I want it doubled? No, I don't. So single thickness. I'm going to go through the bell this way. I'm going to go through the loop on the underside of the box. Let me pull in just a hair. Okay, camera, get focused. There we go. So I've gone through the bell this way, through the underside of the box. Now, I'm going to go through the bell this way again so that I end up with through there. So I've got one tail out here, one tail out here on either side. That way I can tie it. On some I've tied them up very tight. Others I've let them hang down a little bit. I think on this one I prefer the look of hanging down. Was I on camera while I was doing that? I don't know. I hope so. So I've got this lined up where I want it. I'm going to tie first a square knot. And if you're not sure, I know there's right over left, left over right. The way I determine this, and since I'm in close, possibly you can see this, there will be one side that's coming out on top, one side that's coming out lower, like one's higher, one's lower. The one that's higher goes behind the one that's lower. I don't know if nearly as clear, but that's how I keep track of it. It's like, where does it look like it most comfortably wants to lay, and that will get you your knot in the right direction. And I'm going to back this back up because there's no way I'm going to stay on camera. Whoops, that's not what I was trying to do. And back up. I just know I won't stay on camera trying to fiddle with this if I'm in that close. And then just a little tiny bit of a bow, which can start out much bigger and be scrunched down, which is why I left myself all that extra. I would dearly love to do some miniatures, but I don't know. My fingers are just not as agile as they once were. A little bit of nerve damage I've had tested, but I did have surgery on one wrist for carpal tunnel, and it honestly did not improve much. A little tiny bit, but not a lot. So I'm not going to have it done on the other hand unless I absolutely end up with almost no function. It's not bad. I just have very, very slightly less responsive nerves in my fingertips. Like, they're not numb, they're just not as noticeably responsive. Okay, so I've tied that tiny bow. And what I'm going to do, I'll come back in, I'll brave it. Okay, I'm going to stay on screen while I do this. I'm going to put just a small dot of glue and work it into that so it won't come undone. And I am working it in just by pressing on it. And that also dabs off some of the excess. It will dry clear. You'll never see it there. But that'll keep that bow from coming untied. I'm not a big bow person, but once in a while it's the thing. And I think for tying on a jingle bell, that seems about appropriate. So I'm liking that. That feels finished. I do not have to do a pokey tool thing on this because we can do it on here. Now, on some things you'll have let's pull the focus back out. I'm so glad I realized that before I went any further. Okay, so I am liking this on here. I've put the hanger on. We're golden there. Did that dot of glue, so that's all fine. And what I was saying is we're not going to need to do the pokey tool as a demo on this because we need to do it on here, and it's the same for any of it. In this case, I'm going through glue and ribbon, so that's my challenge. With some of the cardboard, especially the ribbon spools, the cardboard's a bit tough, so you really got to poke through and wiggle around. May take a little bit of effort to make that happen, depending on what you're poking into. My challenge here was getting through the ribbon more than getting into the cardboard. And that's also going to be my challenge a little bit with the next thing. And what I'm going to do, I want silver or gold. It's not going to show much, but it shows a little bit. I very slightly favor the gold, but the hook is silver, so I'm going to stick with silver. Okay, so I want to make a very short, oh, give me an in-between focus here. Okay, I want to make a short little, basically like a screw eye, but out of tinsel stem. And if you're not using tinsel stems for anything else, I do recommend at this point using it for this or using Chanel stem pipe cleaner. There's an advantage, and that's that it's got a little bit of bulk for the glue to stick to. These ornaments are so light it probably doesn't matter, but on some things it is a help. On this it may be a hindrance because I'm trying to go through this ribbon. So this may be the one time it's not a great idea. I'll show it to you on here. I've poked through the hole, and I've got this, I've got that cut, but be sure and feel the end and make sure you don't have a J-bend in there. That's going to make it hard. That may be why it wasn't going through that very well. And pulling off a little bit of this just so I can see that wire tip. I didn't do this in the past, but I'm thinking this might be what will help me get it through the ribbon. So anyway, poke that into the hole, and then you can twist it in at this point. Because you twisted it together, you can twist it in. When you get it all the way in, back it out a hair. I'm not going to do it on this one because I don't really want to glue another one into this. But put a dot of glue there and then twist it back down, and then don't hang it up yet. Let the glue dry. Hot glue, maybe, but I think in this case white glue is your better bet. Now let's see, since I did clean some off the tip, if I can get it started, I should be able to twist it down through on here. Okay. That ribbon wants to just, self-heal. I understand, I do, but don't do that. Okay. Let's see if we can get that to twist in. Okay, on this one it's going to fight me. So I'm going to switch over to some plain wire, which most likely I do not have right handy. For plain wire, you can, I actually do have it. You can use a couple things. You can, if you don't happen to have hardware store wire around, because some people don't, you can use a paper clip, bend it out, get it down. You will have to have, you're going to have to cut the paper clip, so you're going to need wire cutters. So if you have wire cutters, you probably have wire around. But you can do that. I'm going to use the smaller side. And you can run that right in. You can run that right in. Come on, cardboard, cooperate. Thank you. And down. And then you're definitely going to want a good amount of glue because you're down into corrugated cardboard and you're not connecting with very much. And I've just left that hook over rather than closing it up. Now, if you happen to have small pliers, which if you have wire cutters, you probably also have pliers, you can bend that in further, just like that. And that can go in. You can also use any hardware store wire. I've got some really lightweight 24 gauge aluminum wire here. Oh, please tell me I was on camera while I was doing that, because I forgot I was in close. So you can wrap one up like that. Clip. That's maybe a little looser than I want that to be. There we go. Okay, that's maybe a little looser loop than I want. a good way to get smaller loops is to stick something in there. This is pretty lightweight wire. I'm hoping to get away with not actually pulling my pliers into the process, but I may have to because I can't quite get hold of that. That tightened it up enough. So there's that. And I think in this case, since I have that option, I'm going to use the thinner wire loop. I'm going to want it cut in such a way that the wire bits are close together at the end. And make sure it's going to go in before I get any glue involved. It is. Stick some glue right on the wire. Push that down. Just kind of spin it a little bit as it goes in. Wipe off any glue that hung up on the outside. And I'll check that in a little bit and see that it did actually glue in. I'm feeling like it needs a little bit more to get down inside, so I'm going to do a second time on that. Seems like a lot of that glue ended up still on the velvet ribbon. Pull it out a little further, get a little further down the shank. Okay, I'm going to leave that completely alone and let it dry before I put the hanger on it. And that should do. So there we go. I think we've got them all to the point where they're ready to be hung and displayed and enjoyed. I'll clean things up a bit and get a better shot of all of them together, but there's the ones we made today. Oh, I was going to hang these bells below. Not all done. Let's do these. And let's use a jolly little bit of red. Basically, I'm going to tie strings onto all these, and I'm going to finagle under this. Although that may be a bit difficult because I did do it really tight. You know what? I did do it a little tight, and it's done. I think we're going to leave the bells off. But know that it could be an option. You could string up 3 of these bells on some little strings, tie them however you like them. Maybe do it before you put this piece around, and then you could have 3 little bells hanging below. Charming, but I'm going to let go of it for now. We're going to call that enough for this video. I could go on forever. More and more ideas. Never run out of ideas. So there's just, one option for things you can do with your Christmas cards. Another version of it, I used a spool this size, that the center part of that is pretty small. It's not all the way out here by the edge, it's in here. So there was a lot of space to fill. I did some deep ruffles, like I think these were almost 2 inches wide. Yeah, I think it was a solid 2 inches wide ruffle that I folded in half. So I did deep ruffles. I cut out the card and stood the snowman up, had to do a little modification because his stick arms were difficult to cut out. So I cut snowman arms out of snow and other places on the card, glued a little thread on there to make up for parts of the illustration I cut off. But the glorious thing about this, it can stand on the countertop and just be, a table decoration kind of thing. You can hang it on the tree. I put a little tiny loop of thread behind this circle of paper. So it can be hung, but also it has a hole in the bottom and it can be a tree topper. So that is an option. And I think all the others are pretty self-explanatory. You've got the basic techniques there. So this is just one other use for the greeting cards, another way to do it. Lots of options. A fun little way to play around with stuff that's just left over from the holiday that might be too pretty to throw out, but what in the world are you going to do with it? This is what you can do with it. So if you don't do them this year, because it's so close to Christmas and maybe you are just over the whole making thing, now you know what to collect for next year. Get a little box and throw the cards, start collecting ribbon spools, watch for jingle bells, things like that. You can get everything together, and then next year, more at the beginning of the season, if you prefer to do your crafts before Christmas Day, you can put together a bunch of these. Makes a fun party. You can do these. This is kind of an all ages thing, so you can do these with fairly small kids, all the way up to and including, you know, the grandparents' generation. So you can get everybody involved. And even for people who say they're not crafters, there's nothing difficult in this. Everybody can get their fingers in and come out with something that looks reasonably pleasing. So have fun with it. Have jolly holidays, whichever ones you celebrate. And I'll catch you in the craft room next time.